Hi, if you're looking for today's webinar on cybersecurity, it's not optional. It's a strategic imperative. We'll be getting started in just a couple of minutes. We're just waiting for people to join. Or a couple of seconds, I should say. Okay, we'll go ahead and start to get started. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's session. Cybersecurity is not optional. It's a strategic imperative. We're excited to have you all joining us today. I'm Kirsten with NJ Biz, and just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Please ask any questions you may have in the question and answer section of your console. We will do our best to answer your questions live or time permitting at the end of the session. Should we be unable to get to your question, a member of our team will reach out to you after the webinar. Today, your host will be Lisa Kavanaugh. Lisa is the Chief Operating Officer at MicroStrategies Incorporated, a Parsippany-based technology solutions provider. Lisa is joined today by Ed Serafin, Chief of Security at MicroStrategies, Eric Pinto, Senior Director of SOC Solder, Cy Fenton, Managing Partner at Proximus Consulting Group, and Mark Longfield, Managed Service Practice Leader at MicroStrategies. It is now my pleasure to pass this over to Lisa to get today's conversation started.
Thank you very much, Kristen. I appreciate it. And I want to just thank our panelists for joining us today. I look forward to an engaging conversation and our ability to share valuable perspectives with our attendees as to how they apply the insights that you guys share with their critical decisions that they need to make. The attention required for businesses to protect themselves continues to intensify. Since the pandemic, cyber attacks have more than doubled, and it's taking our global cost of cybercrime to a predicted $9.5 trillion in 2024, which is just a staggering number. 80% of CIOs will increase their cybersecurity budgets in 2024. And this is very frustrating to many of our customers that we work with, as they feel that cybersecurity investments required to protect their businesses are never ending. Unfortunately, the threats are real, and that consistent investment is what is needed to protect their businesses. But balancing those investments with what is needed to also remain competitive and drive growth is a very tough challenge. So our goal with the conversation today is to really help inform how you need to consider and the things you need to prioritize when making those tough decisions, as well as how to get the most out of those investments. So we're going to start our conversation today with really trying to get a better understanding of how has the cybersecurity world changed in the past few years. And we'll start off with Eric. Can you kick off our conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. Cybersecurity world's changed quite a bit. I think that smaller to mid-sized businesses traditionally have been worried about antivirus and anti-spam and email concerns, email-borne concerns. And while those concerns are still here, what businesses are starting to realize is that they have responsibility that goes beyond just those key endpoints into their data and their infrastructure. They need to have more awareness over what's going on, what's coming in and out of the organization, and who's accessing what information.
Yeah, I actually see that exactly what you said, Eric. But I always also see the fact that they had the firewall, they had the antivirus on the endpoints, and that was sufficient back in the day. And now you got the defense in depth or DID technology and thought process, right? You have multiple layers because there's no one silver bullet for stopping that malicious activity, right? So.
Yeah, you're so right, Mark. What I sort of see is a change in thought. Leaders in businesses 10 years ago thought, oh, especially if you were small, medium sized, you sort of felt like, hey, I'm covered if I've got sort of the basics because the bad guys aren't going to go after me. But the truth of the matter is now that the bad guys go after everybody. I was just telling another client that in my own home here, I blocked over 1 million scans in 1 month. And so So, it's not a factor of, oh, why would a bad guy go after you? It's all, half of the stuff is automated these days. And so it's totally changed in how you have to manage that threat.
Well, it's amazing how you see the evolution. I mean, when I first started in security, it was a perimeter defense. Everyone on the inside of the perimeter was expected to be there. So, basic firewalling and antivirus, you were good. Now we've developed and evolved into the zero trust era where everything has to be checked, not just people, but the devices. So, I mean, it's like Mark said, defense in depth is super key. And more to your point, Cy, the reason why SMBs above all are targeted is because of the lack of security measures that you see in most small to medium-sized businesses. So the adversaries know that those are ripe targets. And there's a lot of SMBs out there that are tied into some serious critical systems. I mean, it's a problem.
Yeah.
So it's easy picking. And to the side of automation, within 15 minutes of hooking up any device to an open internet connection, you are immediately scanned, and they are looking to brute force into your system. So the level of automation and sophistication today is off the charts.
So to
Yeah,
continue that, I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the one thing, Ed, I want to also add to that was, with the SMBs and the other clients, they're constantly adding those other devices, other appliances that connect to their network, the IoTs, the Internet of Things,
Yes.
right? They're not thinking about that, not protecting that, right? And then they're starting to move and migrate to the cloud, right? They have a hybrid approach, and they got to protect that too, because that's just another closet, that's just another server room, right?
Oh,
So,
man, yeah.
it's you got to think about the whole solution, right?
It's amazing how, and I've encountered this many times where clients, they shift to the cloud and they think we're good now. And I can understand that thought, but the reality is just you're on someone else's computer, and while they might be securing their stuff, your stuff is still ripe for the picking if you're not doing what needs to be done.
And they were forced into it. I mean, we were all forced into this mass movement to cloud and beyond our doors just a few years ago, right? Where most organizations were plenty fine. Everyone coming into the org inside the perimeter will secure the perimeter, and we're all set. And then 4 years ago, we were all forced into the cloud. So it was a move that the end client and the service providers really weren't prepared for.
Yeah, I would say we weren't necessarily forced. We were partially forced, right? Like there's a lot of innovation going on that's driving a lot of benefit to the end user too. And we can't overlook that, right?
Absolutely.
Like I don't want this to be a scary, hey, everybody just come off the cloud because cloud's dangerous. Cloud is super beneficial. Right behind me here, you see a Shopify point of sale system. Right now I'm working on a project where we're building Shopify point of sale for brick and mortar stores. Who would have thought we would have ever done that, 5 years ago? And so the benefits of cloud and all the things that it can bring you are super powerful for the business. But to everybody's point, I think everybody's talked about it very adroitly here. Like we've got to be thinking about that. In the security world, we call that threat surface area, right? So what's happened is your surface area has gone from this little thing that in your business to this giant big thing that includes all kinds of things like Shopify, like Microsoft M365, like even Zoom and other and a whole bunch of other little things like Monday and all these other tools that we use. So it just that's what's changed, right? Like the complexity of how everybody works and how everybody wants to work has changed a lot. And so as security technologists people, we've really got to sort of roll with punches and help the businesses figure this out, because the truth of the matter also is the bad guys have gotten so much smarter that they're hitting all of the SMBs, right? They're hitting you guys for $100,000, $500,000, $1 million worth of ransoms sometimes.
And that's a fantastic point. So, I mean, this is an overwhelming topic. That's the problem here. The key point is it's such a vast landscape of things that you can do, you should do, you shouldn't do, that it becomes overwhelming. So to think about it in two aspects, you have what Cy said, your risk surface, and then you have your attack surface. One defines the other. And the objective with a risk surface is to get as close to net zero as possible, but understand you're never going to get to zero. But the closer to that zero you get, the better you are, the more insulated, the more resilient you are, which is a huge important thing in today's landscape.
Okay, I'm going to jump in quick with a question that we received.
Mhm.
And the
Sure.
question is, what about the continued critical importance of OT security?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just like what Mark said before about IoT devices, you also have OT devices or operational technologies, right? So now we have to deal with the IT infrastructure and systems that support our businesses, and then the OT infrastructure that supports things like manufacturing and other types of technical equipment and systems inside an office or a facility. But a lot of that does get overlooked. I mean, it was like years ago, people would plug the printers into their network and not even think of it. And that became a real big problem and a big target as a result. You know, the same holds true with these OT systems. And the fact is, these OT systems are, in most cases, very sophisticated and have a lot of potential as far as hardware goes. And that's what the attacker wants. They want to get a foothold in the environment. And that OT environment is truly a huge target. So it's one that you really need to focus on when you're developing your OT to start building out, just like on your IT side, your defense in depth structures to your OT side as well.
So to that point, what are some of the trends that are the emerging, really the trends? Because obviously I think one of you guys said this, like the way we protect ourselves has to evolve with the technologies the same way the threats are evolving with the technologies that are used against us. But what are some of the key approaches that businesses really need to take to try to help mitigate these impacts? Mark, what are your thoughts on that?
Where do you start? There's so many. So
Pick the top three. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the mitigation is going to be the end user, right? Your user is your weakest link, right? So training, education, making sure that they're educated, maybe phishing phishing examples to make sure that they're know when something comes in, what to do when it happens. But the cybersecurity training is pretty key for all those. Obviously, the EDR and MDR, the endpoint detection, managed detection response on all the endpoints, that's super critical as well. There's a lot of things that happen with URLs and DNS redirects, right? You get an email and you click on it, so you want to have protections. And again, I talked about that defense in depth technology, and there's not one single thing that I can think about. It's why I didn't know where to actually start, but I could probably talk about it for half an hour. But there are common things that we see a lot, because there's a lot of things that are focused phishing attacks and things of that nature. And as long as you have those different things in place, including like maybe an AI solution around a email spam filtering that understands it's not you, or it's not your VP or your financial person, it's someone outside, it'll understand that and kind of block that too. But there's so many things we can go at, so many different directions there.
Well,
So let me toss.
goes.
Go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, let me toss in. I'd say everything that Mark just said is about visibility, right? So visibility is really the key thing, right? That's the first thing to start with. And Eric's company does a great job of that, right? Like so like there's a lot of different ways to slice that whole topic, right? Visibility. Do I know what all's on my network? Do I know what's happening on each endpoint? Because that's the whole point is the bad guys only have to be right one time, versus we have to be right all the time. So we really have to be able to have better visibility in over the entire network and all the tools we use. And Eric, I'll let you talk a little bit more about that, because you guys do that for a living.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that without getting into the bits and bytes of the technologies that you could use, it really is about a small business owner being more aware of where their risks might be, more aware of what their responsibilities are in terms of the data that they're accessing, managing, and maintaining, and then working with their team, whether it's an internal support infrastructure with third party, but working with their team to then ask questions and say, hey, well, we still have that server that has patient data. We still have access to our top 10 clients' information? Are there things that we need to do from a layered perspective to be more aware and have that visibility, or do you as a third-party service team have that visibility, to adequately protect us? And asking those questions of yourself and of your team.
So I could say working on both the public and private sectors, I would say it's a two-pronged approach, really, because yeah, you can carve. There's thousands of attack vectors, right? And there's the things we know, the things we don't know that we don't know, and the things we don't know, right? So I mean, visibility is a hugely important thing. Awareness is the other side of that coin, because your people will always be the weakest link in an environment. And the objective should be converting that weak link into your first line of defense. And you do that with awareness programs, because if you don't know what you should be afraid of, then you're not going to have any awareness to what you should be doing about it. And this is where we see a lot of problems, because virtually every business, there's going to be an interfacing with another human being. So you can't just put up the walls and turn off the internet. You have to communicate. You have to effectively get out there and do what you're doing. But that doesn't mean you have to do it in an unsafe manner. So awareness training is super critical. And then, yeah, the visibility, because if you can't see it, you can't defend it, right? So if you don't know what's going on in your environments, or you have a lot of shadow IT in the environment, which is people plugging things in without the IT department's awareness. If you have that kind of thing going on and your environment's all over the place, you're going to have significant exposures, and those exposures will lead to severe consequences. So visibility and awareness, those are probably the two most important things you could address.
That
before we
awareness.
get-
Okay,
go. I was just saying, before we get off the OT question, because I love that question, because the truth of the matter, and it ties back into how things have changed. 10 years ago, when we thought about IT, we thought about IT as an enabler, but we didn't think about it as the enabler, right? As the most critical part. And there's not a single business, not a single one, or county. I saw another question about a county. There's not a single entity out there that does work that doesn't use IT systems, right? Whether they're OT or whether they're IoT or whether they're, our collaboration systems and everything else. And so I think one of those pieces is, and things that have changed, is understanding that the IT component is so critical to running the business that you can't really run them anymore without it.
Precisely.
So with that thought process, if as as business leaders are sitting down and trying to determine how to prioritize their spends, and you guys touched on it a bit, but just very clearly, if you had to prioritize top 3 security things that you were going to focus in on in 2024, and making sure your organization had it, what would you guys say that would be? And Sai, if you want to start.
Top spends. Let's see. Identity access management. We talked about that a little bit, right? But so that's a fancy word for knowing who is on your network, when they're on the network, and what they're attaching to, right? So identity and access, and that leads to what things that they can connect to. Bad guys most often get into your infrastructure through some kind of compromise to identity access management. So that's a big topic. We can talk about that by itself for an hour, but that's a place to invest. Whether it means, hey, we got to get the basics down and get a much better password and multi-factor and et cetera, sort of just locking down the end user, or whether that means, hey, I'm going to cover all of my devices so that, again, I can have visibility. Because if I have a good access identity and access management plan, then one of the things I can see is who all's logging in from where, when, etc. So that'd be one thing. I would say, I would also, we talked about visibility some. I think there are lots of tools out there that help you with that visibility across everything else that's going on, sort of knowing what things like patch levels on all of your critical infrastructure, like routers and network equipment, etc. The other thing I personally think, and this could be a controversial conversation, but I think that that the security teams, security leadership within an organization, whether that's a director level person or a CISO, needs to be concerned about resiliency. And we heard Ed talk about resiliency because one of the things that we, as security teams, we sort of have to go into it with a new thought, which is, hey, the bad guy is probably going to be successful at some point. And so how are we going to be able to be resilient as a business and get back to that, hey, we can't function without X, Y, or Z thing. So the
Absolutely.
resiliency in different forms, it can come in, planning. So if you go through and do the planning exercises to assume, an intrusion, and then do an incident response test and plan and do, tabletop exercises and those kinds of things, I think I would invest in that too, because I would assume that you are going to get hacked. And at some point, something is going to have to get fixed and back up and running fast. And so you want it, that's a business problem now. It's not a technology problem as
Yeah.
much. And the business understand how to do it.
The reality is here, it's not just sophistication from an attacker's perspective, because you deal with multiple levels of attackers, right? You have nation state level APTs, or advanced persistent threat actors. These are the people or the groups that attack other countries, but they attack those countries by targeting businesses. It's about increasing their impact, and as many systems as they could compromise, that's that many more systems they could actually launch attacks from. So you're susceptible to that. The sophistication in hacker syndicates, yes, that's increasing with the proliferation of AI systems. We're seeing a lot more sophisticated attacks from that perspective. And then you have your MAAS, MAAS, malware as a service, which pretty much eliminates the barrier to entry for just any bad guy to come in and cause harm to your environment. You make a small purchase, you get access to a sophisticated tool set that's super easy to use. And the next thing you know, your systems are being targeted by attacks. So you're dealing with a lot of different attack vectors. So visibility, all size points, the resiliency. I know we're all numb to the fact that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, but the reality is it's not even a matter of when, it's just going to happen now. So we have to understand it's going to happen. We're going to be targeted. Every one of your organizations on a daily basis are being targeted. And if you set up and look at your internet connection, you could actually see these attacks trying to hit your environment. So it's going to happen. So it becomes, how do we weather the storm when it does? And we do that by increasing our visibility, increasing awareness. I love what Cy said about tabletop exercises. We purchase all this stuff and build these policies, but when do we actually try them out? How do we know it's working? How do we know it could work? So tabletop exercises are key. We all should be using multi-factor authentication at this point, or two-factor at minimum if that's all you have available to you. 16-character passwords minimally at this point. So I would start inward with what I have, what can I change within, and then work outward to better my visibility, better my programs. Yeah, Eric.
Yeah, Eric, what are you saying?
Yeah, I want to jump in on that, because I think that we might be getting a little in the weeds for like a business owner to understand, the complexity of some of the levels that we're talking about. And it really starts about, again, with that awareness trend and visibility trend, first understanding yourself. So if I thought about three things that I need to do right now, if I was a business that had access to sensitive data, healthcare data, financial data, stuff that people would want, because you have to think, why are these bad guys targeting in the first place? It's typically some level of profitability, right? They're going to make money from the data that they're going to extract from my business and either ransom it against me or sell it in the open web. So if I were a business without understanding the technologies at all, I could first say, all right, well, what would they want of mine, right? So if I'm an accounting firm, I've got accounting data. If I'm a mortgage firm, I've got personally identifiable information. So the first thing you need to do is assess. You need to assess your organization and understand where these risks might be within my organization and where I might be compromised first. Second, once you've assessed, you need to have a security plan, whether that's your internal team putting it together, whether it's the third-party team that you bring in, a security plan. That security plan is going to be led by smart people like Ed, that's going to talk about multi-factor authentication and talk about the fact that you have weak passwords and things like that. It's going to be laid out in that plan to say, these are the things that we're doing today to better secure ourselves. And then third, response. And this goes to what Cy was saying, the ability to respond in real time should something happen. Understanding that I can't just delete all my machines and go to backup. I need to understand that maybe if I was compromised, maybe I now have a responsibility to tell those potential victims of those the data that got out. I need to alert them. I may need to alert the government. I may need to alert regulatory bodies. But understanding what's required if I'm compromised and what my next steps to recovery and from a resilience perspective, recovery and being back to good. What are those steps? So assessment, and then a security plan, and then some sort of incident response or plan as well.
And
Yeah,
let
I wanna
me
I want to go back
go
real quick, Sai, if you don't mind, because something you
Please.
said about IAM. So, the users, a lot of things I want to kind of keep it at the base level, right? Because you need to know who's logged into your network. You said that, or into your systems. How many times have we seen old accounts still be there? They might not be disabled. The accounts are created 14 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, but no one's monitoring them. So doing that, and then least privileged access for all of the users in your environment. Nobody needs domain level access. No one needs that administrative level, right? And certain people's do. And I want to go back to what Eric was saying. The visibility, we all spoke about that, right? But if you don't have the resources, they're not doing it 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. They're doing it 24/7. You
Right.
need a managed security
Precisely.
service provider or an MSP, right, to do that, right? Because you need eyes on glass all the time so you can respond. There are automated and AI type of engagements with some of the solutions, but you also want to make sure it's real, and it's not, a false positive or what have you. You want to make sure you respond quickly. But I just want to say the tabletop exercise is key because you have policies, you have procedures, you have a security incident response plan. It's great, but you have a problem and it hits and nobody knows what to do. They're looking at a document, they never tested it out. Those are the biggest things. The tabletop is something that you should go through and experience when it's not really an issue.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, I'm completely with you on the tabletops, and the only thing I wanted to say in addition to that, because that's great synopsis, is tabletops are not for the IT staff necessarily. It's really for the business, because this is
Yes.
a business problem.
Yes.
It's a business problem. Most of the stuff that has to happen if you have an event is a business thing. Who do I contact? Who do I talk to for law enforcement? Who am I going to, what do my help desk people say when people call, or my customer contact center say when people call because their accounts are blocked out? Am I going to pay the ransom or not? Who's going to call the insurance company and talk to them, right? So you can't leave that to the IT staff to go figure that out. That is a business element, and it sort of goes into the larger context of a risk, a risk committee or an enterprise risk kind of plan. But these IT risks have become so important to that because the businesses can't run without the IT. Even things like, okay, well, I have a store and my point of sale is locked up. How am I going to take money while, how am I going to keep the store open while that's happening? So that business problem needs to be at least involved. I guess it can be led by IT staff. I led it when I was, when I was a practitioner, a CIO and a CISO. But it needs to be heavily involved with the business people.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think the
Agreed.
point you guys are trying to call out, and just for everyone who's listening, that, the tabletop is really, it's practicing what your plan is. It's practicing when you have something that's happening in your environment, or when you laid out your plan, as Eric was talking about, of saying, it's not a matter if, it's when, and when an event does happen, what are the steps that everybody needs to take? And it's like anything else in life, if we don't practice it at some point in time, we're not so good at it. So it's a matter of and it is a joint. It's making sure the IT team knows what they need to do with the technologies that you've invested in, and it's making sure the business team members understand what they need to do, because your brand is at stake. To your point, there could be law enforcement at stake. There's multiple factors. So one of the things I want that you guys have really touched on is, that organizational approach when it comes to incident response, and how that's become, there used to be business, recovery tests and things like that in practice. It's with the world of cybersecurity and how it's changing. It really is just that layer. I think you said aside, that layer of resiliency that needs to be incorporated when you're thinking about, cybersecurity. And it's got to be part of the DNA, and it's got to be practiced. Otherwise, it's just kind of a plan that sits there. and doesn't necessarily get practiced. And so when there is a real incident, your ability to shut that down as quickly as possible and mitigate impact to your organization, is at risk. So do we have a question, Kristen? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, no problem. Actually, this question fits right into what we're talking about. So businesses are bombarded with the endless ecosystem of security tools. How do you recommend they navigate this internally?
So, I mean, I'll take it. I mean, everything has a use case. Everything should have a purpose, right? So, I mean, unfortunately, there's no silver bullet products out there. It's not going to be one thing you got buy or service you sign up for that's going to take care of everything. So this is why we keep harping on defense in depth. Instead, what you should look for are the use cases for the given tools. Because this year, I think it's going to be what, a $1.2 trillion industry for security this year?
9.5.
Yeah, it's getting more
It's insane.
expensive, and that's because attacks are increasing and ramping up, and the actual successful breaches are ramping up. So, I mean, with that, you're going to see that technology. So you really should have a well-defined use case for making these purchases. So, I mean, universally, you want visibility. So, I mean, you want to look for the tools and services that actually offer that. And then not just, okay, well, now we see everything. What happens when there's a problem? What do we do? Then you start venturing into that. But the point is that if you intend to do this yourself from the ground up, there's a considerable upfront investment that needs to be made because of all the individual components you have to purchase. And then that all has to be built and tuned and tweaked. And you're not going to see any ROI on any of these things for at least 6 months to a year in most cases, because most SMBs don't have a robust security team. They're real lean on their security teams. So the better option is to partner with MSSPs or MSPs that offer the solutions, that have them tuned and tweaked, like Eric at Sock Solder. I mean, his systems are there to be brought into your systems and immediately turnkey to safe.
Yeah, and I think, Eric, you hit it very well when you said it's like anything else you do from a business perspective, right? It is overwhelming and there's a lot that's going on, but I wouldn't say it's any more overwhelming than what each business faces to stay relevant and to be innovative, right? You need to you said it well, you need to be able to understand what risk your organization has. You have to make sure you lay out a plan and then understand the response. And to Ed's point, many times you need help with that. But Eric, would you just kind of maybe expand on that? Because I think you handled it well when it comes to looking at it from a business perspective.
Yeah, if I was out there, a small mid-sized business with a small team, not a lot of focus in security, a lot of IT generalists on staff or in my MSP partnerships, it is daunting because all you see is tools. It's like going to the hardware store. Do I need all these tools? Right? I can walk up and down Home Depot and I can just put tools in the cart all day long, but do I need these tools? So if I haven't properly assessed my organization and my infrastructure and my team and my risks, then I could just throw a bunch of tools at it and still never really solve the problem. So that's why there is something called a gap analysis that looks for gaps within the organization, and then you go ahead and you fill those gaps with the appropriate tool set. And a lot of that will be layered. So I might have a tool on my endpoint and a tool at my network that are doing similar things, but they're attacking it from two different sides. But any of that really starts with appropriate guidance. So if you're confused by the bulk of tools that are out there, bring in a third-party MSP or MSSP that can provide the appropriate guidance and say, okay, first, let's assess the organization. Second, let's identify gaps within your existing structure and put in the appropriate tools. Specific that guidance, if you don't have it, you need to look for it.
Specifically, this is one of the reasons why that we at MicroStrategies conduct what's called an SPR, a security posture review. It's a holistic gap analysis. So again, you can dedicate and focus on the use cases. I'm sorry, Mark, I didn't mean to step on you there. Go ahead, man.
No, but you had it because I was just saying the same thing. Because that base, posture, security posture, and how do you get it? You have to do an analysis, and then you come back, and now you're not throwing tools at a solution. You're actually strategically putting a tool in that you have a gap for. Right.
And you understand that the return that you're going to get on that investment, right, Mark? You'll know that
exactly.
What gap is that filling and why, and what risk is it reducing? Yeah.
Right. But again, then there's the layers you got to put on as you get the visibility, and then what you want it to do when it finds something, to Ed's point he made earlier. So
But what makes also a gap analysis or an SPR so valuable, it's not just addressing the need from like our perspective. We want to come in, we want to see and exactly analyze where an organization is and on their security journey, right? How far they've made it. So, but it's also being supplied with that detailed report. In most cases, these reports are over 100 pages in length. It's that detailed because you're looking at the entire organization, not just the IT stuff, not just the things that you perceive as important, but everything. And then it's factored all together with, okay, here's your weaknesses, your weak points, your gaps. And then here's the recommendations to address it. That is the by far the best way to approach this massively overwhelming topic.
Yeah. So as you guys work with organizations and try to help them as they're dealing with this, overwhelming complexity, what are some of the internal challenges that you see businesses encounter that prevent them sometimes from maintaining that agility and flexibility in their cybersecurity plans? Mark, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to say right out of the gate, it's time, resources, and skill set, right? So they don't know exactly what to do, or they may know an idea and they don't have the time or the resources or the skills to do it. So
Exactly.
the biggest thing is, just finding the right people to actually do that. And that kind of intimidates and makes them not maybe move forward with that, right? So that's what I was kind of saying, and then you heard it said a few times, MSP, MSSP, come in, we can evaluate and do that, and we can help them, we can partner with them. And if it is just getting it up and running and turning it over to them and educating them, that's okay. We can do that for them as well. But I see the biggest problem is them getting started because they can't. That's where we're here to help. And the SPR or the posture review is definitely something that helps us do that. And then we can identify their level of skill and maybe make and work with them and make that work. Maybe we can educate their people on their side to do some of this work. And it's not just left on a third party.
And
So
that
as
you
a
said a
CISO,
word that was
I'm
super
sorry.
key, Mark, partnership. And
Yeah.
whether you go, it don't matter what MSP, MSSP you partner with, it should be a partnership. It shouldn't just be an exchange and that's it. The best case scenarios are the one in which both organizations work together.
And so as the CISO, in the world that you had to live in the business side, what did you see from trying to lead an organization, through making some of those best decisions, but some of the headwinds that you ran into, because obviously they're trying to run a business, right?
Yeah, I was thinking about this as we were talking about this. So as a business owner, a lot of times, you know, so doing cybersecurity right is not inexpensive, right? And the first thing that popped in my mind when you asked that question was money. And Mark said it, resources, it's time, it's people, but it's really money. The truth of the matter is that sort of how we think of it as business, we want to take all of our risk and control it all ourselves. And so building sort of a platform and a big team and such is expensive and just hard. And you said before, okay, well, there's an ROI on these things. The truth of the matter is security ROI is totally different than ROI on other on like IT organizational optimization and benefits. Security ROI is about avoiding expense, avoiding a bad outcome, right? And so and planning for it and minimizing. I heard a podcast yesterday. They talked about minimizing the blast radius, and I think that's a great idea, right? Like, hey, we're going to get hit, but we're just going to have 3 machines, locked up with ransomware, which we already have backed up and we can handle, as opposed to the entire infrastructure going down. So I think thinking about it in those larger contexts and helping people understand what the real overall risk is, and then saying, hey, it's not a bad thing that we, because there's no one and dones here. We've got to sort of invest. And then I think getting back to that whole partnership idea, it's not possible for an SMB to manage a security program as well as your security partner will. Your security partner is going to have a much easier, better time of managing everything that they need to know. And it's sort of that idea, the Peter Drucker idea of what's the chief end of a business, right? What's the chief end of a business? Well, it's to make money and to serve its customers. And the other things that you're doing, like defending the estate from a cyber perspective, you ought to be able to hand off to a partner that can do that on your behalf. And I used to run a pretty large security staff. I more and more think that I want to farm that out to my good partners.
I'll add to that. The biggest barrier is definitely budget, but I think that even with budget, it comes down to a misalignment in understanding of why, right? So we get in there and we're all kind of nerdy on the technology side, and we start talking about multi-factor. We start talking about these different layers and different technologies, and we're excited about it because these are the right choices. But we haven't, adequately shared with the end customer the reasons why they need to worry about this, the reasons why this is important, perhaps even the responsibility, and we haven't really touched on compliance or regulations yet, but the responsibilities that they may have, whether they want to own it or not,
Right.
So, whether that's HIPAA responsibilities, whether that's financial responsibilities, the responsibilities that they have for the data that they're entrusted with while it's on their networks, while they're sharing it, while they're interacting with it, it's their responsibility to secure it.
So
We have to be upfront about that.
One second, because one thing I
Yeah.
want to add to Eric's point was, they don't understand why. But when they start understanding why is when they get cybersecurity insurance and they get that long,
Yes.
15-page document, and they have to check yes or no to it. And they're like, oh yeah, we have this. It's like, no, you really don't, right? So they start understanding what their posture isn't, and then starting to realize what they need to actually cover, right? So, and that's typically how we see some of the engagements come through. It's like, hey, I got to fill this thing out, and I want really good cybersecurity insurance, but I'm like, all right, we need to help you with this. So again, going back to that SVR,
and even in that, you'll still get the questions of, well, can't you just check the box? It really is about why you need to do this, why you should be worried about it. And again, this is your responsibility as a business. It's your responsibility to your partners. It's a responsibility to your customer base. It's your responsibility for any of that data that you have. It's your responsibility to secure it. And if you can drive that home to that business owner, everything else then falls into place. But that is the part that's typically missing in the conversation, is the understanding that you are responsible for this.
Well, it's that awareness.
And these are the steps you need to take.
It's that awareness thing again, right? So it boils down to awareness, understanding the challenges that you're facing and why that it's important, and we're seeing legislation now as we progress in time. You're going to start seeing more stringent regulations and legislation that's going to start holding organizations more accountable, executive leadership, owners, because if you didn't do something right, or if, say, you chose not to do something entirely because of money or budget driven, you're going to start seeing those consequences
We're seeing it
happening.
now.
And it's a reality because
we're seeing it now.
Right.
Kristen, do you have a question from the audience?
I have a couple of questions from the audience. So we could start with one and then let me know when you want the other ones. One of the questions is what are the essential tools and strategies you would recommend for small to medium-sized enterprises looking to significantly enhance their email security and overall security posture? And they're also asking if you can discuss the considerations for integrating the tools effectively into an existing IT infrastructure.
I could start. So we've talked about that some, right? Identity access management, sort of at a larger scale. What you could say, so on email, Microsoft owns 80% of that, 90% of that, and Google owns the other bit.
Yep.
And so the truth of the matter is that those tools that are already in place with M365 and with Google's workplace products are excellent. And they have gotten everybody a pretty far way down the road. Google's done actually a little bit better job of sort of requiring people to forcing them into a corner. But Microsoft's getting there as well. And so just implementing the basic hygiene stuff that they say to do, like multi-factor authentication, which we keep saying that over and over again. And the reason, by the way, we say that, guys, is that there was a study in, I think it was 20 or 21 that Microsoft and Google did together, and basically what they said was that 95% of the breaches that they sort of know and understood around their platform would have been prevented with multi-factor authentication. And so just that one thing of turning it on and requiring it of your users. And I don't think anybody can bear with the excuse anymore of, oh, it's just too hard for my users to do, because
Yeah.
that's just not.
Exactly. And
so-
then you have the external perspective here. So that's the internal from the business's end. Now, what about the external with the attacks coming in? You know, again, we're looking towards AI, and for the longest time, that was just a flashy catchphrase, you know, but the reality is today, the AI systems out there and even the machine learning systems out there have gotten so advanced. I mean, standard spam filtering just doesn't cut it. I mean, you need something that's going to intelligently examine email and communications that comes in, because that is a primary attack vector. So I would say leaning more towards an AI-based or machine learning-based system. And again, Microsoft has various tools in that department. There's a number of other players as well. And they're pretty relatively easy to integrate into your existing stack. So it's not a huge barrier, a technical barrier to entry. Mark,
The other thing is it's in addition to, though, right, Ed? So we're keeping the
yes.
Microsoft, we're adding the AI, you're getting that defense in depth, right? But the other thing is the conditional access policies inside of 365, right?
Oh,
The
yes.
geo blocking, the things of that nature. So you don't let people from other countries or wherever you don't want them to come from allow access into your email, right? So, you know, there's a lot of different things that way that Microsoft can do, as Cy was saying. They're just strong. You just have to implement them, and most people don't. They turn it on and they set it and forget it.
Yeah,
And
that's
not
exactly
really
right.
Layered approach. And that's the theme throughout this entire conversation, layered approaches. You know, you're not going to do any one thing. It's the symphony of things come together that build the good posture. Get Eric, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Yeah, well, yeah, just turning on the tools, right? I mean, most of these cloud tools, you know, that businesses have gone to have, you know, systems in place, have protections in place. They'll have multi-factor in place, but it's not turned on.
Yeah.
So simply turning on the appropriate measures within the tool set that you're using, and then having some level of infrastructure to receive that email, receive that alert when you get it, and having a team that can then act on it afterwards. And that doesn't have to be complex. That could be your own team if you're built for it, right? But understanding that I just got this alert from Microsoft, it says this is a problem, let me investigate, and having the capacity to do so.
Exactly, in that capacity to do so, because these tools do require human intervention. You know,
Right.
AI is not going to drive the human element completely out of this. It's going to enhance and make the human element better and more streamlined. But you still need to respond to these things. So it's not just buying a product and hooking it up. You now have to manage that product and do what that product's telling you to do, or chase down the leads it's providing you. So that human element, either by a security team or a security partnership, is critical.
So I wanted to kind of touch back to points we were talking about a little bit before with respects to, you know, the things that were challenges for businesses to encounter. And I think, you know, Eric, as you were kind of going through and explaining some of the pieces that, you know, you see business leaders kind of struggle with. What do you see from the perspective of when you do encounter with business leaders? This is for all of you. I'm going to start with Eric. What is the mindset you see of business leaders when they actually do kind of say, you know what, I'm not going to continue to overwhelm by this. I'm going to kind of embrace it, and I'm going to do it in a way that doesn't break the bank, but that becomes, for lack of a better word, part of my culture. Like, what do you see with organizations that have shifted that mindset with it when it comes to security?
Yeah, that's a great question. So once you've tapped into that why, and they got an understanding that, okay, I do need to participate in this. We are, you know, maybe not a top tier target, but we are a target because we do have, you know, XYZ in terms of data. We need to take the next steps. A lot of the times it then becomes, okay, well, you know, help me, right? Help me understand, help me figure out from the massive tool aisle, which 3, 4, 5, 10 tools I need to pull out. And they're typically very receptive, right? I mean, and you can make this alike to, when you go to the, to get your car repaired, or you go to the doctor. Once you understand, okay, these are the concerns. Okay, well then, you're my guy. Help me understand what I need to do to get back on the road, right? And I'm finding that more and more organizations, once they click in to the fact that it's a responsibility, they are super responsive to, let's take those next steps. And those next steps are available. They're affordable these days. There are a lot of tools driven by AI that are super affordable. They just need to be led in the right direction and understand, what they need to take a look at.
You know what? After, one of the first things we see after, like, the basic endpoints are protected with whatever it may be, an endpoint detection and response, is a SIMSOC solution, right? They want to ingest all the logs for log correlation, because that's going to say, oh, wow, I'm having all these people try to hit my VPN, and I didn't realize that, I didn't realize they're trying to come in. I see all these different things that are trying to hit my servers, or whatever it may be that you're actually, ingesting logs for, and you're getting real data. So they actually see stuff they've never seen before, going back to the visibility thing we spoke about since the beginning of this conversation.
Yeah.
And they see value. And I see that the first bigger purchase that a company makes is more of a SIM solution. They get their ingestion of everything from their antivirus, from their firewall logs, their switches, everything comes in. And now there's a correlation of what's happening in that environment. And they can actually see it's not always bad, but visibility is good because you're showing your systems are stopping it from happening. But what if it didn't? What if we need to do something? That logging and that visibility shows you what you're getting, right? And then obviously you can go to the next step, where it can isolate and do things of that nature we're talking about with ML and AI and things of that nature. So just wanted to add that.
We start by addressing visibility. That's logs, that's metadata and network flow data. I mean, there's a lot of data points that you can ingest. And then we start moving into the action side. Now that we have this visibility, how do we address top 10, top 50 type attack vectors? Then we test, and then here comes your tabletop exercises again, your purple teaming exercises, where red and blue team, which are your offense and defensive players, work together to figure out, okay, does the tool work? We know it turns on, but is it doing something for us? Let's test it. These are the investments of resources and time that also needs to be made when incorporating these systems into any given environment.
Yep, that's right. And I wrote down when you asked the question, Lisa, empowerment, so, and I like the way Eric thinks about it here. You got to understand the why. So a business leader, as soon as they start to frame these things into a business problem and not a technology problem, this is not a technology problem. It's a business problem.
Yes.
And so, okay, we've got a business problem. How are we going to solve that? Well, I got stuff scattered all over the whole world. I got this giant, fabric of stuff that I got to deal with. I've got to, put in a SIM, right? A security event and incident management platform. I've got to hire a SOC, a security operations center. How am I going to do that? What's the best business solution for that? Do I need to run that myself? Do I need to have a partner that's going to do that? Do I even have the expertise in-house to do that?
Mhm.
How are we going to respond as a business? So all of those things, it becomes sort of the business owners start to go, oh, well, I understand what the problem is. And by the way, the last 5 years and all of the news about all of the various high profile ransomware attacks and such hasn't hurt that, right? That's helped us help the business leaders go, oh yeah, maybe we really do have a problem. And maybe we need to prepare ourselves to do that. And we prepare ourselves by, putting in the right tools, investing in the right people, investing in the right partners, and then doing things like tabletops and business continuity plans and such. We had a question about a business continuity plan. That to me, that used to always sound like a big giant problem, but the truth of the matter is, and very complicated, and maybe I just didn't even want to, get into it. The truth of the matter is you just got to start. You start by understanding what your business is and how the technology is enabling that business, right? So, and can I function with or without that thing? And
Yep.
if I can't, then what do I need to do you know, manage what's my fallback, and it's really sort of a thought process on resiliency. And you can just start with that. Set your teams down and, you know, your executive team, and say, okay, everybody, we're going to think about what happens if the internet turns off, and
Every
you know,
company.
it's on the whiteboard, and just start.
Yep.
You know, you can hire a lawyer to come in and do a whole big business continuity plan and incident response plan and such, but that's not going to do you any good if you don't really understand about all the components of your business and
And
what can.
those are your
So
two key important plans, right? Your incident response plan and your business or BCDR, business continuity disaster recovery planning, right? You need to have that scoped out because it's going to happen. So what do? And then you test the plan to make sure that it actually functions, because there's plenty of plans out there that look great on paper, but then the moment you start trying to implement things, oh shoot, we didn't account for that. We didn't think about that.
missing
And
this
that's
or that,
fine. Precisely.
or that
Precisely.
person moved on, or there's all kinds of things that could happen to
Yep.
business continuity plans and incident response plans. So that's why it is important to test them.
Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left. We've talked about a tremendous amount today. I appreciate very much all the different insights you guys have shared. And we've gone from, you know, how complex the environment is, it continues to evolve, to visibility, you know, awareness, resiliency, planning, responsiveness. If we had to, you know, have our attendees kind of walk away with one thought, you know, as they leave this, and if, you know, again, hopefully we didn't overwhelm them with more information, you know, so how do we sum it up into one thought process that we'd want to leave them with from today's time that they spent with us? And I'll start with you, Mark.
I'm going to say security posture. And in order to understand what your security posture is in your business, you have to have visibility. So walking away, understanding what you do and don't have, and what you need help with, and who to reach out to, right? That you don't have to do it on your own. There's a lot of people out there and companies out there that can help. So I think it's going to be, I know we talked about visibility up and down, but it is understanding the security posture of where you sit, you know, what you currently have in place today, and what your gaps are that you need to kind of fulfill.
Understanding your security posture is going to be a huge critical thing that's going to make this a lot easier, because understanding where the weak points are just makes this a lot more effective. It makes an overwhelming thing very simple to navigate, or at least simpler. And it's only going to get scarier from here. Every year we talk about the scary world and how attacks are increasing, sophistication, all of that. But the reality is, as we especially start to see in the geopolitical landscape, these instabilities and all these different countries, you know, the top 5 things that we're going to start seeing more of are AI-driven attacks. We're going to start seeing more malware as a service-based attacks, which allows anybody to throw the attacks at your organization. You know, we're going to see increased nation state activity that will attack your small, medium-sized businesses, because they are just the largest attack base that there is. I mean, everyone targets SMBs because they are the low-hanging fruit, unfortunately. And then IoT and industrial OT-based attacks, along with state-sponsored attacks. So it's going to get more complex, more sophisticated, and a lot more dangerous to operate in the cyber realm. So it can't be stressed enough that, yeah, your visibility, awareness, you know, those 2 things are going to be key, but making the right security partnerships are going to be critical in understanding what your security gaps and posture is.
And I'll tack on, security doesn't stop, right? So you can assess, you can get your gap analysis, you can put your incident response plan today, but to Sai's point, what if that person, that key critical person, leaves, right?
Mhm.
So what does that do to the plan that you have in place? So the security itself that you put in front of your organization needs to be 24/7 and continuous. You need to be always monitoring to see who's accessing it, because the bad guys aren't working 9 to 5. They're working on weekends. They're working at night.
Yep.
And then you need to have a plan in place that is continually tested, right? So that you know that it's effective, so that you know that you've made moves or changes within your business, and that you've addressed them as you move forward.
That is well said, Eric.
Sai?
Yeah, I think to sum it up, I'll say a couple things. One, don't let your lack of sort of understanding or expertise around security stop you from going ahead and moving forward. There's plenty. Cybersecurity is a team sport.
Yep.
And, you know, we haven't really talked about one of my favorite bailiwicks, but there's all these community resources, depending on what sort of subsector you guys are in, that
Yes.
that can really be a great resource about understanding. But at the end of the day, cybersecurity is a team sport. So don't let the fact that you don't understand it keep you from doing it. And then the other thing I would say is go out and people have touched on it different ways. I like to think about it as it's our responsibility as business leaders to build a culture of security within our organization. And that means that it's everybody's job, from
Yes.
the CEO down to the guy who bags groceries, and or sweeps the floor. It's
Yep.
everybody's job to participate. And so sort of that's a part of that awareness and training that we've going, but investing and building a security culture within an organization that will enable the org, and it'll allow it to sort of weather the storm of all of those threats that Ed talked about. So it's like, oh man, the more you listen to Ed talk, you're more like, oh, I don't know if I need to bury my head in the sand or not. Don't bury your head in the sand,
Yeah.
No,
but
don't.
instead build a culture of security.
Well said.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Mark, Cy, Ed, Eric, it's been a great conversation. Appreciate all the insights that you've shared, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Everybody.
Glad to be with you.